all, Donald Trump is calling this Election Integrity Commission. Really, it's about voter suppression. They hit the road going to New Hampshire. The panel held a public meeting there questioning the Granite State's same-day voter registration and raising concerns about the 6,500 people who voted in the state during the 2016 presidential election, even though they had out-of-state IDs. Well, let's just say they got smacked upside the head by folks in New Hampshire, officials there who said, you do know that's allowed. People can actually do that. But that was not enough for Commission Vice Chair Chris Kobach, who is known to lie about voter fraud.
And until you make the next cut to determine how many are non-domiciled and then the final cut to actually determine how they voted, we will never know the answer regarding the legitimacy of that particular election.
I mean, literally, Republicans in New Hampshire were telling him he's out of his mind when it comes to allegations of voter fraud. Let's break this thing down here with Kristen Clarke, Executive Director and President, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Kristen, what is amazing here is that here's a dude from Kansas who has been sanctioned for BS, who's lied to folks testifying, who has made allegations of voter fraud and was proven to be a lie, and now he's trying to tell New Hampshire about their state when they say, we got this.
One of the most powerful moments during the hearing yesterday was when the Secretary of State discredited Kobach's statements and called them reckless.
The Secretary of State, who is responsible for voting in New Hampshire.
That's right. And he said, how dare you cast doubt on elections that I conduct and carry out in this state. We know that Kobach timed placement of a column in Breitbart, a vehicle that has been described by Steve Bannon as a platform for the alt-right. He planted this story about fraudulent voting in New Hampshire, and what he's really doing is placing a target on the backs of students. We know that there are countless numbers of students in New Hampshire who may have an out-of-state driver's license because they don't drive during their time attending college in that state, but they have a right under that state's law to register and exercise the right to vote.
So stop right there. So for folks to understand why this matters, I'm going to go back to Texas. Waller County, where Prairie View A&M is located, they have been fighting, PV students have been fighting white elected officials in Waller County for at least 2 decades because they know that if Prairie View students are registered to vote in Waller County, they could flip any election. And so they fought to keep them from using their IDs to actually vote. There have been legal battles going on. And so what Kobach is trying to do, we've seen this in other states as well, they want to target young voters who they believe have a propensity to vote for Democrats to keep them from voting in those places, knowing full well if you have a university that has 6, 8, 10, 20,000 students, how they're going to vote. In North Carolina, they pulled an early voting location off of the college campus. In Wisconsin, the clerk there in one of the towns in Wisconsin said she was not going to put an early voting location on the college campus because too many of those students vote Democrat.
Right. It's not just students, though, right? Throughout time, we've seen schemes that have targeted African Americans and Latinos and the elderly. At the end of the day, the Election Integrity Commission exists for one sole purpose. They're staging these meetings across the country to lay the groundwork for a national push around laws that will make it harder for vulnerable communities to vote.
In fact, these folks yesterday even talked about having a background check.
That's right.
At the polls.
It was one of the most offensive moments of the hearing. John Lott, who is known to be a Second Amendment zealot, somehow thought that it would be interesting to talk about using background checks that we impose on gun owners, people who are seeking to buy guns, that we use those kinds of background checks on voters. It's clear that this commission wants to intimidate voters and chill the electorate. We are continuing to litigate against the commission because they are failing to be transparent. We learned in the course of our litigation that commission members are using private email addresses to carry out and conduct commission business. Our end goal at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law is to shut down this commission. We think it's an unprecedented vehicle. It's a threat to democracy with the sole goal of pushing voter suppression efforts across the country. But let me make one final point. The makeup of speakers who spoke during the day was deeply troubling. There were 3 panels, a total of 12 speakers. Every single one of them was a white male. No race, no gender, no ideological diversity whatsoever. This is Kobach racing forward and really just building a platform to push voter suppression at the end of the day.
Spencer Overton, President, Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, also author of the book Stealing Democracy, The New Politics of Voter Suppression. Spencer, that's exactly what this is. This is not even, they're not even trying to dress it up.
Yeah, it's certainly a witch hunt. And just to kind of step back, you remember Republicans lost by 1,000 votes in terms of the U.S. Senate race, right? And so here, Kobach has found 5,000 votes where people registered with these out-of-state IDs. And again, many of these could be college students, et cetera. But before any real investigation is done, Kobach says it's likely that there is fraud. I mean, that is just so political and irresponsible. And again, to do that when you have the Secretary of State from New Hampshire who's there. But it really makes me wonder, was this a setup all along? Is this the reason they put the Secretary of State of New Hampshire on this commission so they could get this data and try to make this claim?
Right, right. And we have to view this in the context of what's happening on a larger scale. All of this is unfolding at a time when we're seeing the Justice Department scale back civil rights enforcement. We haven't seen this Justice Department mount a single case under the Voting Rights Act in 2017. In fact, we see them reversing course and taking positions that are fully opposite to the stance they've taken for years. It's clear that this is an administration that is mounting an assault in the most vicious way on voting rights, and this commission is part and parcel of that broader agenda.
Angela, look, you're Republican, and this is clear. They are trying to shave off 3,000, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000 in each of these states, knowing full well that can affect elections. We saw in North Carolina where they actually sent emails specifically asking for when did black people vote. And when they saw that upwards of 80 to 90% of black people voted in the first week of early voting, they slashed early voting sites all across North Carolina in the first 2 weeks to keep black folks from voting. This is an approved tactic of the Republican Party.
Well, we need this commission to broaden its purpose. I mean,
why do we need the commission?
Well,
it's a fraudulent commission.
Well, if we're going to have the commission needs to also be investigating suppression. I mean, when we look at our most powerful right, one of our most powerful rights is to vote. And if you're only looking at fraud and not looking at suppression, you're creating
is problematic. I mean, the chairs, you don't have a bipartisan
and in fact, the Heritage Foundation sent a letter to them saying, do not put any moderate Republicans or Democrats on the committee.
That's right.
So the committee can't look at voter suppression because it's not designed for that. It is designed to actually enact voter suppression.
Well, I think Kristen made the point. The 3 words: lay the foundation. We talk about the right to vote. I don't know that there is a right to vote in the federal Constitution.
No, there is no right to vote.
Exactly.
In fact, in Bush v. Gore, it was Anthony Scalia who put in this ruling that there is no affirmative right to vote in the United States Constitution, because actually before, legislatures could actually decide who the elected officials are. There is no affirmative right to vote. The only thing in the Constitution is that black folks and women cannot be denied the right to vote.
That's
so what they really say is this: white folks do not have any protection, legal protections in the Constitution. Is really black folks and women who can't be denied.
That's exactly right. I'm glad you mentioned Scalia as well, because of course we saw a 5th vote for what happened in Texas. They're going to allow those gerrymandered districts to stand, and that 5th vote was the one that Trump put on Justice Gorsuch McConnell. But at the end of the day, they're laying the foundation for a longer game plan. They are trying to constrict the right to vote. Finally, that commission that under Obama, where they talking about expanding the vote, they just had a commission to deal with this question of vote, and many states followed those recommendations. Keep fighting this. This thing has to be disbanded.
And Christian, this is, I mean, again, people might be saying, hey, okay, why are you making the focus of this? One of the reasons I got NABJ's Journalist of the Year in 2013 was because of our intense coverage on voter suppression. This has been the game plan for the last not 20 years. This has been the game plan since the Voting Rights Act was passed.
That's right.
In 1965.
Absolutely.
And it was the election of President Obama where all of a sudden, you saw it in 2010 where they said, oh, all of a sudden, voter ID, all these different legal, and what they've done is they've studied the law to say, okay, how can we legally limit voting so we don't run afoul? Then you throw in the Supreme Court decision about the Voting Rights Act with pre-clearance. That basically gave them the superhighway to be able to go down this path.
That's right. I mean, we're past the era of literacy tests and poll taxes. These are people who support voter suppression, resorting to, quote, more sophisticated tactics to peel people off at the margins. Our elections in this country are hotly contested. Outcomes are very close. You put a photo ID law in place in Texas and you can peel off 2% here. You put a burdensome proof of citizenship requirement in place in Kansas and you can peel off 3% there. It's part of a pattern we have seen throughout history of disenfranchising minority groups. It's one of the reasons why voting rights and defending access to the ballot box is so central to the work that we do at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. The attacks that we are seeing now are unprecedented, and I encourage people to join our fight, learn more about our work and how they can support our fight by visiting our website at www.lawyerscommittee.org.
Okay, don't just visit the site, also contribute.
Yes.
Contribute, because you need money to fight, because you're fighting this in courts.
We do, and the assaults that we face now are just unprecedented in scope, so we need all the support that we can get to mount a fight against this administration.
Kristen Clarke, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Weekdays on TV1.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV1.